All right, short reviews for June 29th. And so uh, th- I'm starting out July a little bit slower. I'm going to have fewer of these short reviews columns this month because there isn't a huge list to work from, and I've decided just to cover things that are a little bit stronger. So I sort of scrambled to find some of these because some of the records I previewed turned out to be of a lower quality than I wanted to cover, and I think it's worth mentioning that I generally I will not cover a record that I would score less than 75 out of 100 unless there's an interesting conversation to be had about it. So the reason why you never see lower scores or panned reviews from me is because I just don't think it's worth my time or yours to talk about albums that are less than above average. So now, there might be some average records in here. Let's find out as we step into Supiniux's Genocidio Infernal, which is the debut full length from this Ecuadorian, I think initially a trio, now a duo, who are located in Geneva, Switzerland, and they still play a sort of bestial, maybe even war black metal, which is I would say influenced by Sarcophago inherently. There is a little bit of like a grindcore feeling to some of their riffs and their rhythms. It does feel like a little bit more of an old school war metal or bestial black metal sound, and I equate that with like Sarcophago and Hades, and you can pick your own associations. I don't think this sounds quite in the like the blasphemy realm, and it's not quite like an Archgoat style record. So this is something different from my point of view. Uh, uh, the big thing is that when I went back and dug through their demo tapes and trying to checked out some of their previous work, they'd been a little bit sloppy, a little bit scratchy. This is very much a band that works on an attack. And this record pulled that back a little bit for the sake of fidelity and presents like a pretty professional, strong sounding record, despite being a band that's all about energy and brutality. So even if you're not really into the war metal thing, I think this type of band might interest you if you're, you know, tangentially interested in grindcore or you like raw black metal, but you want something that's exciting in terms of riffs and pacing. So definitely worth checking out. Genetically Engineered Monstrosity is a debut full length from, I think, like multinational brutal death metal band Tortured, who are this work is very evocative of Spanish musician Oscar Ortega's many projects, and he does a lot of very strong guitar work, which really is the anchor for most of the bands that he puts together. So, but we have some pretty impressive folks here. We've got I think the current vocalist of Relics of Humanity, if you remember that band. You've got Vile's live bassist, and you've got some of Ortega's, I think there's the drummer who also plays in his band Septicemia. So uh, that might not mean anything to a lot of readers or listeners or watchers, but these are all impressive folks, and this is an impressive kind of classic brutal death metal album, which has a little bit of an update to it. So um, a lot of classic choices here between the drum sound is just perfect. The brutality here is just on edge all the time, and I love any brutal death metal record with a John Zig painting on the front. I think that's appropriate, and this reminds me almost of the early 2000s Netherlands brutal death sound. There's like maybe not necessarily the suffocation-esque like disavowed sound, or and not quite the looseness of like a howitzer, but it does feel like it would fit in that realm a little bit, basically because of the focus of the riffs, which is always so upfront. Now the vocalist is pretty impressive. He kind of carries this record in a lot of ways, but for me, uh, every part of this is kind of hitting. The only thing is that I just have a lot of records in this style. It is a very classic feeling thing to me. It could just it needs its own signature outside of just uh, being spot on, basically. So if you just want brutal death metal, this is a fantastic example of it with a little bit of a modern touch. A Blanath Athenalba is the second full-length album from Roman. I guess I would say psychedelic doom metal or stoner doom metal band, Wizard Master, who are clearly, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of groups coming out of Italy these days that are influenced by Electric Wizard, but taking it to a little bit more of a '70s heavy psych or psychedelic rock angle. And this is certainly one of them who've taken that classic proto-metallic touch or psychedelic rock touch and not taken on so many of the bluesy aspects of that sound rather than just attacked it in maybe a more modern throwback doom metal style. Kind of a strange description, but most of it is slow to mid-paced. It has heavily effects-drenched vocals and fuzzy guitar sound, which is strong and standard, and frankly a little bit timid and sleepy. Now, maybe if I was in a different state of mind, I would appreciate the slow and steady creep of this music. I found that they do kind of mix it up early on. It's a very, uh, I guess this release demands quite a lot of patience that I don't always have, but uh, there are some good doom metal songs on here which are repetitive, sort of transfixing and decent, but it just didn't stick with me, this record. I think their first record was a little bit more quirky, interesting, a little off the cuff, and this maybe is it's trying a little harder, but sort of fumbling through some of the important details. I think Tested by Death on here just feels like it's they just couldn't get it out. It just feels like it's just not working for the band. Whereas there's a very similar song Acid on here, which is same pacing, similar riff, but and they fully pull it off. So consistency issues from my point of view, but kind of a cool record nonetheless. Now, I'm not sure how to approach a Zastler record these days because really Zastler was kind of over back in 2012 or so, and the practical reason for using the name is because people remember it and buy it no matter what it is. So inevitably, Dark is fully just a uh, Scott Connor solo album, which doesn't feature vocals. So it's roughly a little bit under 2 hours worth of instrumental pieces, which feature a programmed drums, pretty light bass guitar presence, and a focus on the various styles that he's approached over the years. This feels like it was the part of grand designs to make an oeuvre defining record, a big showing of the death metal, black metal, depressive black metal, 90s black metal, like or doom grass is how they were described it. It's a neo folk variation that's kind of unique to his finger picking style that he's developed over the last 10 or plus years. And there's a lot to like about this artist and the things that he does, and I think his neo-folk work is probably more valuable in the long run from my point of view. I think the lyrics are quite good for some of those releases, but this is an instrumental 2 hour demo that is not bad. Not bad, but I don't think that arrives upon a point other than potential that was there to make these songs something bigger. But I feel like that the Zastler paradigm would never allow them to get bigger than they just plainly are. So there's this accessible, like I could do this too kind of thing that's always been part of the appeal of the band. But I don't know that this is pleasurable or interesting listening beyond the first couple rides through because there are great ideas here. There's some kind of bad ideas here too. So it just feels like someone's handed you a CDR and go check it out, and it's just instrumental demos. Now there's something very classic about that. That is kind of the era that the artist arose from. It really is like the sort of MySpace depressive black metal sort of boon. But anyway, I don't know that some of this could have been cut down. It could have been a 45-minute record. It could have been two 45-minute records, and it certainly could have used vocals for extra expression. And whatever it needs to be, it is. And it wasn't fully there for me. I don't know how to recommend a thing like this unless you're just in love with what the artist does. And I like certain sides of the artist, but this was incomplete, basically. Carnal is the third full-length album from Mumbai, India-based Gutslit. This is a brutal death metal band to start, and one that incorporated a kind of mosh metal and death grind into their sound over the course of their first two records. And this one takes on even more of a groove metal presence. And I would say, obviously they came from that era of like Dying Fetus and Aborted, where death grind and groove and brutal death metal kind of all work together. And this makes for maybe a more accessible, plain idea that comes from it in terms of the group. They've always been fairly approachable and play to the crowd quite well with these moshable songs, and they're able to create some pretty intense and interesting enough grooves in terms of the riffs, and their performances are all very high standard. The production's a little bit sterile, but it's still quite strong. So for me, this is just kind of like um, there's there's a lot of passion behind it, but it doesn't have its own kind of personality. It doesn't have its little extra something to make it special. So very much up to standard, very much above average in a lot of ways, but it doesn't stand out to me beyond just that category, basically. So if you're into this type of music a little bit more, maybe there's more to glean from the grooves of it all, but the rhythmic play just didn't really catch me outside of a few moments. Labyrinthical is the debut album from Voidmilker, and this is another solo project from Gabriel Hugo, who is best known from his post-black metal band Lascar. Now, the Chilean musician here is attempting to mix his interest in avant-garde and dissonant black metal in with melodic black metal, and in a lot of ways, it does end up becoming a little bit more of a post-metal band in a lot of ways, because that's his muscle memory for a lot of the guitar work that he does. There are a lot of evocative and strong melodic black metal moments on this album, but we don't quite get to that level of like a late 2000s Magua album necessarily, which is where those styles merged successfully. And instead we get not a standard black metal record at all. Certainly one that is modest and has a nice raw sound to it. The guitars are quite well composed and a little bit messy, and the vocals are a bit flat. That was kind of a problem for me, but that's not a problem for black metal in general. So I liked this record. I kind of got into it, but it felt like it needed more time to cook. It needed more time to resonate and mean something, rather than its whole experiment basically works, but it needed something extra to make it grand and impressive and maybe more emotionally evocative, because I think it has that potential. So almost there for a debut. I'm confident that he'll iterate, because it is a good idea and it is an impressive kind of showing overall. So I'd like to see what he does next.
Give their own, give